Going to take the North and never give it back.
So that's a good pick. You get the corner. I got to go bold, right? I got to go bold for this.
Yeah, she's got some nice long
Welcome back to the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron. Make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube. And also rate the show 5 stars everywhere that you get your podcast. You can download it everywhere that you get your podcast, like Spotify, Apple Music. Just search for Unbearable Sports. We're here covering the 8th day of practice. It's just crazy that we've had this many practices out here. So we're recapping what happened July 29th on Monday. Short practice. Now, it was raining outside, so ultimately people went inside, and it wasn't too eventful, but some good stuff that we want to talk through. But first and foremost, want to remind everyone, make sure to hit the notification bell, because tomorrow we will be live to do our first preview of a Chicago Bears game. Yes, it's preseason, but if you haven't attended one of our preseason shows, it's great because we show you who to watch out for to make it as enjoyable as possible. So if you need some help enjoying the preseason games, stay tuned. Stay tuned tomorrow, and we'll give you the list of people to look out for, that who you should watch when they have all the backups and the third stringers and the fourth stringers who could actually maybe make a name for themselves. But let's get started with someone that the Bears actually signed. So the Bears ended up signing Demetric Felton out of, he was a former Brown. That's where we really know him from. But the running back, ultimately, this is a shifty playmaking running back at the running back position. And I like it, but I think then this opens up the question of, okay, well, what about Homer? What about Ian Wheeler? What about these other running backs that we have? I see this as you're adding a little bit of depth, adding a little bit of competition. Do I think this means that someone else is gone? No, I just think that you're bringing in someone that has been a playmaking threat, but yet again, really hasn't been as good as we saw him in his rookie season in Cleveland. Ever since then, kind of dropped off, because when you see this name, you go, oh yeah, I remember him in fantasy where he had a couple good weeks. That was really about it when it came down to Felton. But still, good signing, solid signing, and we'll see. The Bears also did not cut anybody because, guess what? Tory Taylor is technically a overseas player that the Bears brought in because coming from Australia. So the Bears were able to swing this without removing someone. It's just one of the, try to open the borders abroad to try and bring in more talent. So Tory Taylor, another great way that he's helping out the Bears. So they have 91 players technically on their roster right now. And no, that doesn't go over to the 53-man roster, so we can't have 54. But let's talk about some injuries, though, because this is where it might be nice to have 54 players on this roster. Yet again, no pads were on today, but the people that weren't practicing, Nate Davis, which we'll talk a little bit more later on about. Kyler Gordon continues to not be out there, just with some tightness, as they're calling it. Travis Homer, Ian Wheeler wasn't practicing. Jacob Martin continued to not practice, and Simba Webster as well. Also, a little bit of note, Reddy Stewart was starting at the nickel corner today. Normally, it's more so been a Greg Stroman, and also we know Josh Blackwell can come in and out at that slot position, but Reddy Stewart getting the nod at the nickel position. So normally we'll wait for the Caleb report later. I actually want to start out with the Caleb report because let's have some claps. So we cleaned up the penalties, only one pre-snap penalty for the offense as a whole. And I want to bring this up too, because I love when something good happens for the Bears, but also we have to look at this objectively. We had only one pre-snap penalty, but there was no pads. So what's going on with the pads, right? I want to see one pre-snap penalty without the pads. As we talked about last show, it felt like Braxton Jones was kind of talking about people getting a little scared or just the offensive line jumping a little bit early. More so just offensive line jumping early. So with that, I want to see this with pads, but it's obviously good. I will take the less amount of penalties right now, but now when the pads come back on, are they going to continue that or are they not? But also too, let's talk about Caleb, right? Besides just, the penalties of the offensive line. The offense looked good. Sean Hammond reported Caleb Williams with some, in all caps, highly impressive touch in a red zone session Monday at Hallis Hall. And this is another thing you love to see. We talked about this as well, where, hey, for some reason, we're not throwing touchdowns in the red zone. But today, there's a lot of red zone throws and seemed like we were completing a lot of great passes. It was a good day for the offense. Courtney Cronin also mentioned just 2 notable throws from Caleb Williams in 11-on-11, one to Keenan Allen in the back of the end zone where Allen outstretched his arms to haul in the pass. 2 plays later, Williams throws with anticipation, keyword there, to find Roman Dunze in a tight window on the opposite side of the end zone. So Caleb overall, though, people saying good in the 11-on-11s, but the offense kind of struggled a little bit in the 2-minute drills, and also Montez Sweat would have had a sack. And to be honest, if we're talking about the defense, I'll even jump a little bit to the defensive update. The defensive update, Nick Moriano of CHGO reported this, and when they do this whole good and bad, and something that I was actually talking to my dad about this literally today. We're going, what's going on with, it seems like Braxton Jones when he's out there, it's good. But what's going on with Darnell Wright then if Montez Sweat is always beating someone? Nick Moriano just flat out said, Darnell Wright can't block Montez Sweat. And I'm curious, for the people that are watching, are you concerned at all by that? Are you concerned that, hey, Montez is just seemingly cooking Darnell Wright? Now, we want to see the pads on, right? We all know that it's more difficult to block without pads, but that's where Montez has been winning, has been dominating on his side, which is against Darnell Wright. So yet again, our iron sharpens iron, but iron's got to stop it. Iron's got to push back a little bit and start stopping Montez Sweat a little bit more. So that's something that you know that an offensive lineman needs to take that next step, right? Rookies, they kind of struggle. Is he going to take this next step this season? And we talked about this when previewing him as well, where is it going to be a 1 year and then he's going to kind of take it to the next step, or second year, or going into his 3rd year, is he going to take that next step? When would this potentially happen? Because it doesn't just happen the following season. But also, high praise from Austin Booker about offensive lineman Braxton Jones, saying, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. So yet again, Braxton kind of getting more love, which is, hey, if one of the offensive linemen is getting love, I'm all about it, because we'll talk about Nate Davis next, and we'll talk about the offensive line. But anyways, Caleb Williams, though, good day just all around from Caleb. And also Caleb answered some questions, and you got to love the confidence. Love just the thoughtfulness that he puts into answers, smart head on his shoulders. And later on, we will talk about, does Caleb want to play in the Hall of Fame game, and talk a little bit more about it before tomorrow, which we should then know if he will actually play in the Hall of Fame game or not. But let's talk a little bit about Nate Davis. 2nd day in a row, Nate Davis was not participating in practice. They also emphasized that this was, in fact, an injury. This was not him sitting out. He's hurt. And also Shane Waldron firmly said no competition at right guard. But also you have Matt Eberflus, this quote, availability is everything in this league. So you've got to be available to practice, and you've got to be able to go through hard in terms of doing hard better during training camp. So really kind of pushing almost, and it's in the context of Nate Davis, that, hey, when you're in training camp, you got to go hard. And there was other little pieces that I read too about just Nate Davis. You're someone that typically has not practiced all the time, and you do need to kind of get your lumps, get your armor on. And that's all what Matt Eberflus said. This is a quote from him. That's all part of preparing the first part of the season. Being able to do that, to callous yourself, that's your individual responsibility to the football team. And when you're not out there, guess what? That doesn't happen. And to me, that's a direct shot at Nate Davis, because it was in the context of Nate Davis not being out there. And yeah, you see that, and it's calling out just how he does not want to practice. And to Matt Eberflus's point, he's correct. Nate Davis hasn't been practicing, or he wasn't practicing early on. And I also want to say, too, this is 2 days, right? It's not like he's going to be out for the season, but it's just a bad look. Yet again, if your whole thing is you're not available, or you're not practicing, and you're not practicing, it's going to look bad. If you're someone that always goes to every single practice, right? It's in your own meeting, your own personal meeting. If you are always on time to work and always on time to your meetings, if you're late, does anybody really care? They go, I can't believe that they're late. But if you're always late and they say you have to show up on time, and the time that you don't show up, that's going to factor in more. It's just the way of life. So Nate Davis, it really kind of rubs the wrong way. And just so if anyone's curious, if they cut him, they would save $602,000 this season. So you're really not saving a lot on the cap. It's not like you're saving that $10 million against the cap instantly, right? You're really not saving much if you ended up moving on from him. But if you wanted to, you could. And that's where it kind of brings up, okay, do you just want to see how this goes? And with Waldron saying this guy's the right guard, is it really nothing? But also, we talked about this yesterday when we were discussing the arrangement of the offensive line. This is the second straight day that we saw Coleman Shelton at center and Ryan Bates at the right guard position. And the reason why that this is something that we are keeping an eye on is we wanted to see with the depth chart, do they try swapping out someone else at the right guard position? Do they put in a Jatiri Carter or Cowart, right? Do they put in one of these other guards that they have on the roster when Nate Davis is out? But instead, they're shifting Coleman Shelton at center and Ryan Bates at right guard, which is the original story that we were talking about heading in. If you can't rely on Nate Davis, then do you kind of have to go with Coleman Shelton at the center position, and Ryan Bates is just your do-it-all, do whatever. We just want to have the best. We just want to, if someone goes down, Ryan Bates, you fill in, right? And unfortunately, and we said what we would like to see is just the best center, but we'll have to see ultimately what goes on, and does this continue to be a problem? Hopefully, it's all nothing. But we'll just double check and see what ends up going on. But let's move on to the defense. We stayed a little bit too long on that offensive line. Let's talk defense, where we already mentioned the whole thing about Montez Sweat. Just absolutely dominant, looking great. Reddy Stewart being a starting nickel. Yet again, Kyler Gordon wasn't out there, and this might just be, hey, let's see how the young man does against other competition. But also, Greg Stroman, even though that he wasn't the starter, still had a very impressive day. A lot of people saying he jumped a screen, just did very good stuff out there at that, even though he's playing with the backups, did a pretty good job. But also, a lot of love from Mark Grody and Brendan Sugru out of around Tyreek Stevenson, just saying that he stood out, and just people gushing about Tyreek Stevenson looking good. And love to see that, because we were talking about the defensive backs, but not really specifically calling out Tyreek Stevenson. It was nice today seeing some Bears reporters kind of call specifically Tyreek Stevenson out for looking good. But then next, the last final bit, right? Caleb was asked about the Hall of Fame game, and he was very adamant in his stance. He wants to play in the Hall of Fame game. And this is my take on this. Right? I want to see him out there because I think that it's important for him to get snaps. And that's what he mentioned too. The importance of getting real snaps. Even though it's preseason, it's real snaps going against people that will hit you. It's different when someone can hit you. And I think Caleb knows that also too. Besides, because you want to get experience, and that's the best way to learn, especially for him. And I said this yesterday. Do we expect the Bears to compete for a Super Bowl? What's the point of this season? The point of this season is to make sure we have Caleb Williams in place, that we can nurture and get him better. And by him taking these seemingly easier snaps in the preseason, I'm all for, right? He's still needs to prove himself. So I like the idea of playing him in the preseason. Also, this is something that I really like. He wants to be the best. He wants to turn the tide of Chicago sports and be different. And, he wants to be in the Hall of Fame. I think it's really cool if his first game isn't some random preseason game, but the Hall of Fame game when we have Mongo going in, when we have Devin Hester going in. I think that is one of the coolest things that you could say about your rookie quarterback getting his first start. Yes, it's probably going to be 4 snaps. It's going to probably be the first drive. But I think that is so cool. So to me, that's what I want to see. I want to see him out there, and I also want us to get excited. I want us to see him play. I want to see everybody be able to see Caleb Williams out there and just get a glimpse of who he is. And all that I think about too, because yet again, I was talking to people about this, and they would say, well, what if he gets hit? And all I picture is Justin Fields when he was looking like left, and I think they were going against the Colts, and it was no one picked up the right-hand blocker. And he just gets absolutely drilled. And what people were saying was, well, Justin was calling the protection and he shifted everybody left. And then that left nobody blocking the guy on the right-hand side. So he just gets absolutely pummeled, which was a kind of how the rest of the season and how the rest of his career in Chicago ultimately went. But seriously, I would just love to see him, if it's just for a drive, something that us Bears fans would love to see. And Caleb's a competitor. He wants to be out there playing. And I want to see it. So tomorrow, we'll be live and we'll be breaking down what the decision was. And we'll be talking about the Hall of Fame game. We'll be breaking down also what happened during camp too. So we'll be breaking out camp and also previewing all the people that you need to watch out for during the Hall of Fame game that is on this Thursday, right? We're just about there, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure to like and subscribe out there on YouTube. Hit the notification bell so you know when we're going to go live tomorrow. And also, download the show everywhere you get your podcast. And if you're listening out there, thank you. Rate 5 stars if you can. And with that, Unbearable Sports Podcast, we are out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bride.